Hey there, Goblins. This is the Goblin King. It's Thursday and I bring you another tale of woe and misery from pop culture. Or a rather funny one. I suppose it all depends on your point of view. For me, personally, this one is actually pretty funny since it's a story where a bunch of self-important blowhards get taken down a couple of pigs. Who am I? How did I get into your room? And why am I blathering at you about pop culture, you ask? Well, I already answered the first one. I'll certainly answer one more. The other one is a surprise. Now that everything's settled, I first came across today's story on that old mainstay bounding into comics. This article revolves around localization translators and lots of salt. Lots and lots of salt. So this article follows the recent release of a video game called River City Girls Zero. It's one of those old school side-scrolling beat-em-up games, and it's apparently part of a long-running series over there in the land of the rising sun. Originally released in '94, as far as I can tell, this marks the first time it's ever been released outside of Japan. Though I believe one of the games at least has been released worldwide, just called River City Girls. However, that's not the story. If that was it, it'd really be more of a blurb and probably wouldn't be a bounding into comics story. No. The story comes in after it was discovered that the game offered two English translations of the original Japanese text, labeled in the game as English New and English Literal. The difference between the two being expressed as English New being more localized and closer to the English translation of the first game that was released in the States, the English Literal being an English translation that was as close to the original Japanese script as it's possible to get. I'm guessing that any weeb currently listening to my ramblings will fully understand the implications of that. Said implications apparently also weren't lost on the guy who seems to have done the English New translation, apparently. As shortly after this discovery he decided to go to Twatter. Yep, I'm sure you all also know the implications of that. However, for those who might be new to this whole thing, let's take a look at his tweets, shall we? Well, unfortunately, we can't actually go to the source for said tweets, as you can see. You can also see by his background pic there why I'm making the assumption he worked on this game. Or maybe you can't yet. Here, this should help. That pic actually looks rather similar to these sprites, I think. I don't know for sure, but let's operate under that assumption, and if I'm wrong, I'll accept that. Anyway, these are his tweets right here. Most of his are actually rather reasonably argued, to be quite honest. You don't really see much salt until the later ones when he's talking about how this more literal translation option affects his professional integrity and shows that the company doesn't trust him. For my reasoning, why should they? The professional localizers have shown themselves to Japanese companies to be nearly universally untrustworthy at this point, but we'll get into that in a moment. This next person, Jen O'Donnell, makes a decent point about how directly translating things like prose, which tend to exist in any storytelling medium, can cause confusion or outright errors due to missing cultural context, slang, and the issue of prose language often being more poetic, where different words can often have completely different meanings to their literal translation, which is something that programs like Google Translate often run into. I added that last bit. Go me. Anyhow, she completely undermines her more valid points with this idea of this option feeding into, quote, myths and misconceptions, unquote, about the localization profession. Sorry, honey, these aren't myths or misconceptions. There's concrete evidence out there showcasing the utter malfeasance of pro-localizers. Then you have this utter twat, Kevin Frayne, who apparently worked on at least 3 of the Yakuza games. This is where your salt really starts to flow. This is also where I'll be throwing in my examples of bad faith localizations and ass monkeys throwing in their own personal politics and all into any number of examples of Japanese media. As you can see from his very first tweet on this topic right here, he was coming from an adversarial position right off the bat with the fans bad mentality. Then, when you go through the rest of these, he chooses to respond to specific people and call anyone with legitimate criticisms over the localization industry, quote, alt-right. Don't you love it when they use these buzzwords and paint entire groups of people with this broad brush? He legitimately asks for examples of this happening, and when someone gives him an example, he immediately brushes it off and then compares it to Benghazi. First off, Benghazi was a complete and utter fuck-up that didn't need to happen. Second of all, you asked for examples, you utter douche canoe. When someone gave you one that is basically infamous, you don't even answer to it, you just brush it aside. Well, how would I give you quite a few more examples of bad faith translations and needless insertion of Western politics into Japanese art? Fuckwit. First off, we have one of the more recent ones with the whole Seven Seas fiasco. You have examples of these assholes changing dialogue, characters, and outright omitting entire paragraphs because they didn't agree with what was portrayed. They did this with both Classroom of the Elites and Mushoku Tensei, and that's just what we know of. As you can see here, the official translation would be the Seven Seas translation. Obviously, the middle part's of the original Japanese, while the left would be a fan translation. Those are just two examples. There's other examples like the point where Rudius is being a creep and trying to pull down a girl's underwear. The Seven Seas translation has him, quote, pulling her shirt down so she didn't catch cold. Seven Seas had to come out and publicly apologize for this shit and even reissue the correct full translation of the volumes that this happened in, on their own dime because of it. All because some ass-clown localizer, like yourself, Frayne, decided to take it upon themselves to censor and change an original work because they didn't like its message. Want some more? I have them. This one's from Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. The subtitle, which is what I always watch, was closer to the original Japanese, probably because it was a fan translation. However, you get to the Funimation dub and you get this shit. You got one of the characters, a fucking dragon who doesn't understand human society in the least, so runs around uncovered because she doesn't care, talking about the fucking patriarchy. Yeah, this is from Reddit, but I've also seen that Funimation clip. It's not hard to find. Google and YouTube are a fucking thing. Or, how about this one, also from Funimation, a few years back, talking about prison school, you disingenuous fucktard. Literally, completely changing lines of dialogue to make what, an Arthur Fonzarelli joke and a reference to fucking Gamergate? One, most people watching anime aren't necessarily going to get that reference to Fonzarelli. The other is going to age like fucking milk. Then, you have this one from just a few days ago as well. Granted, the Japanese creator of the game, Cyanotype Daydream, came out and said that he wanted to make the changes people were pissed about, but that still doesn't excuse the shit that happens when it's not the creator's will, which it often isn't. Also, Fire Emblem Fates was a fucking shit show just like Benghazi and you fucking know it. Not everyone, or even most people, who criticize you asshole localizers are anywhere near alt-right. That's just your far-left dog whistle. See, I can do that shit too. You know this type of shit goes on in every product that comes out of Japan. If it's not fucking censored outright, then it's changed to be less problematic by oversensitive cunts like you. You denying this objective fact doesn't make it not a thing that happens. Even if you personally don't engage in this despicable behavior, which I'm sure you do just based on what a prick you're being now, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I've just provided several examples across all the different media, from games to anime to books. You're not just disingenuous, you're an outright lying fucking cockstain, in my ever so humble opinion. You wonder why Japanese companies are starting to distance themselves from the Western localization companies? You are the exact fucking reason. Assholes like you that cause controversies around Japanese products that weren't remotely controversial until you assholes got a hold of them. You and everyone like you are the reason this game got an English original subtitle option. You have only yourselves to blame. So cry and let the salt flow because it's oh so fucking delicious. Twat. So, there it is, my goblins. I think I've come to the end of my rant here. As always, check out the article for yourself. The title was prominently featured. Check out these people and their tweets if you can. Form your own opinions. My opinions are my own. That being said, you're more than welcome to share your thoughts and opinions with me in that handy section down below, if available. While you're down there, don't forget that you too can be part of the Viridian Horde by crushing those handy subscribe and thumbs up buttons. Give it a try, you won't regret it. I'll see you all tomorrow for another day in the clown world that is our pop culture. I'll try not to get distracted by Friday Night Tights this week. If it's on this week. Anyway, hail the fellowship. I'll see you all then. Lates.